And an important part of this reaching out is, in a very real sense, a reaching in. We are called to be mindful of our brothers and sisters in Haiti. The heartbreak of that earthquake that struck Haiti with such devastating consequences just a year ago are still very much with us. Though progress has been made, it has been painfully slow. And though I have no intention of completely exonerating the government of Haiti of any responsibility for this delay, yet there can be little doubt that the primary culprit has been the nearly complete destruction of the nation's infrastructure. At the time of the earthquake, the people of this diocese reached out with typical generosity. As you will perhaps not be yet aware, but I'm going to tell you right now, the collection we took up at the Eucharist this morning will be devoted to Haiti. The Executive Council of our National Church has committed to raising $10 million to help rebuild the Diocese of Haiti with a special focus on Haiti's cathedral, which was so completely destroyed. I plan to appoint a task force to help think through and plan through the best way to engage the Diocese of New York in that national effort. Thinking of Haiti, naturally enough, brings to mind the whole matter of immigration. I hope that you have had a chance to read the statement that the House of Bishops issued at its September meeting in Arizona. It was, I thought, a good and balanced statement. On a somewhat more personal note, I took the opportunity provided by the Diocese of Arizona to spend several days on the border itself. As our letter made clear, the situation is complex. Simple answers will not suffice. However, the on-the-ground picture that one comes away with is one of stark disbelief. I am utterly convinced that this situation and the complex of policies that have fostered it will one day cause the American people to look on this episode in our history with the revulsion and the horror that we now feel when we consider chattel slavery, the exploitation of Chinese labor to build our railroads, or the incarceration of Japanese Americans in concentration camps during World War II. Ironically enough, some of those camps were in that very same Arizona desert where today men, women, and children die by the thousands. The thought of the Arizona desert inevitably brings to mind other deserts half a world away, where men and women continue to sacrifice and die in a series of wars of such duration and so hidden from sight that they have become simply part of the daily noise to which we have become all too accustomed. This is so much the case that the recent political campaigns seem to find little reason even to mention them. But we must never forget. We must never forget the men and women who have made such enormous sacrifice. Above all, we must never forget those who have returned from that conflict wounded in mind or body or spirit. We must always work and pray for that peace for which all people of goodwill yearn so deeply. Though we may not spend much time consciously thinking about that war, I have no doubt that it has found its way into the American psyche. How could it not be but to foster a deep-seated anxiety? It so easily gives rise to xenophobia. It probably plays into our irrational response to immigrants across our borders, and it contributes to an irrational fear of Islam. Nothing could symbolize that irrational fear more than the choreographed uproar that was generated around the proposed Islamic Center at 50 Park. I found it fascinating that among the most outspoken critics, few were actually New Yorkers. Though we New Yorkers are rarely of one mind on anything, and that's true, the view is pretty widely held that it is the pluralism of New York that has made it the great state and city that it is. It is in that spirit that I was asked to represent the Diocese of New York, and indeed the Episcopal Church, as part of an interfaith consultation that met in Washington, D.C. in early September. In that spirit of dialogue and inquiry, I have asked Imam Bashar to address us later in the day in order to help us understand more clearly some of the insights and values that Islam and Christianity hold in common. All this has been an eventful year. One important but unanticipated outcome of the financial crisis has struck especially close to home. The General Theological Seminary, one of the most venerable Episcopal Church institutions in this diocese, an institution of broad importance to the Episcopal Church, has come perilously close to bankruptcy. A new interim president and a new interim dean have been recruited to address crucially important and nearly overwhelming financial challenges. As a part of that general turnaround effort, I was asked to serve as chairman of the board. Though it is not something that I had ever anticipated doing, nevertheless, I felt I could not ignore such a request at a pivotal moment in the life of a seminary which means so much to me personally and to so many others as well. This leads me to speak of other transitions. I believe that the time has come in the diocese to look further along the journey that stretches so promisingly before us, further than I can travel with you. Therefore, I am calling for a special convention to be held at this Cathedral Church, October 29th, 2011, to elect a person to serve as Bishop Coadjutor of New York. That person, upon my retirement, to serve as the 16th Bishop of New York. Now, note carefully, I said, upon my retirement. In the meanwhile, I'm not going anywhere. If, as the canon requires, you adopt a budget for the search committee, the process will begin. But remember, these election cycles take several years to complete, and I have every intention of being your bishop and serving with all the energy and wisdom and faithfulness that, by God's grace, I can muster. And so now let us turn to the work that God has given us to do. Thank you.